especially with the way that the world is right now with the pandemic and everything going on, have you had to fire any clients during this period when, in theory, business is at an absolute premium to grab hold of?
We've not fired any, so to speak, but there have been a couple where we've sort of gone over the time. They're not really in our sort of space now in terms of where we want to focus. And I think that's just been, I mean, there aren't many, I think it's fair to say, when we look at them across locally, specifically, that have probably grown at the pace that we have so soon, and especially with everything else that's been going on. And we may have jumped up a couple of notches in terms of sort of the level of where people think we're at from where we started to where we are now. And what that's done as we've shaped the business and we've looked at it, there are some clients that we may have worked with in the last couple of years that if they sort of approached us now, we'd have a very different view.
So, I mean, go back to how you guys actually started, because, there is a story there of how you all got to be where you were, but also there's a story of how you got to be where you are, right? Because there's always an origin story. So take us back to how you got here.
So, I mean, let's go right back to the beginning, I guess, with all of that. And I was sort of brought up, surrounded by people in the family that were accountants or something related with numbers. So that's what I was sort of brought up with, at weekends with the uncle and the auntie and grandparents who used to run a post office in Worksworth back in the day. And so they've always been involved with numbers. And I always remember my grandma being so stern with this, that actually, if you understand numbers, you can do anything. You've got to be able to do that and understand it, and you can drive that forward in a career and always have a career that will last. So I sort of, there I was, early teenagers going, right, I'm going to leave school, I'm going to become an accountant and go through that process. So at 16, I was like, right, I hate school. It's not for me. I can't get my head around why I have to be here learning subjects that aren't really going to give me any relevance for what I'm going to go and do. I knew where I was going and what I wanted to do. So I remember I was applying for jobs when I was before I'd even done my GCSEs. At that point, going for interviews, and I'd got, I think, a job lined up probably about 3 months before sitting GCSEs, with a view then that what I was going to do was sit my GCSEs in the June, July. It wasn't conditional on what the results were. They'd taken it purely based on predicted, which was good for me at that point. And I started my career at PKF in Derby, and PKF were then one of the top 10 accountancy firms in the country. So it was a great name to have on the CV. So I went through that, did AAT with them, great foundation for learning how to do the basic debits and credits and pull a set of accounts together, which I can still do now and still do, because that's part of the day job for me. And that was very much dealing with sort of the small business community across Derbyshire. They literally used to drop bags of receipts off that were covered in motor oil and all sorts of stuff. You'd have to sit there and sift through it and work out what on earth they were doing. And that sort of led me then to get involved with audit as a sideline of doing the AATs, work with them. And Derby got quite a small audit team. So I used to get drafted in when they needed some extra resource on jobs to go out and help out, which then set my direction off to then go and do chartered accountancy. So I was like, right, okay, that's the next step. That's what I want to do. And PKF at that point, that they couldn't give me that opportunity to do it. They wanted me to stay doing what I was doing. I wanted to go off and do audit. So there was a shift in staff at that point between local firms, and there was about 12 or 13 people over the course of a year moved from PKF to Cooper Barry, which everybody knows now because they're rebels of the accountancy world. And I spent about 5 or 6 years there. So qualified as a chartered accountant, which is what I wanted to do, working through the audit team, getting involved in stuff. And I enjoyed being out and about with people. Actually, that's for me was what it was about. It was,
which is uncommon for somebody in finance.
yeah, but this was the whole mentality at Cooper Parry, and sort of you can see the foundations of what they've become now were there back when I was there, which is 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah, it all goes back to those numbers, that, like you said before, right? If you can understand numbers and you can manipulate numbers, then you can do anything.
Yeah, and a bit creative. I mean, literally there was no guide to pull any of this together. It was okay. Let's understand what we're trying to do. Let's understand from sort of the educationalists what they think it should look like. And my favourite question is always why. I mean, why does it have to be in that way? Why can't we do it differently? Why do you need 30 days to do that? Can you do it in 25? You've got to be able to find a way to do that.
Because if you followed what every other agency is doing, you and I know all the agencies in the region anyway, pretty much. Look at how they're doing, right? And you've seen some of the big names get cut in half and then some. Mm. So I read something the other day, which was look at what everyone else is doing and do the opposite. And you guys have kind of done that because you've given a lot up front to people for free, right?
We did in the early days. Yeah. I remember the first thing we did when the guys were literally handing in, or we were debating around whether they were going to hand their resignations in or not at the job that they went to in between. Mm. And because all three of them went together, it was a bit of a blow to their employer at that point because all three of them were going to leave at the same time. So it wasn't a great place to be in. And we were talking through that, and I remember saying to us, one of the things we've got to do, and if I've picked up anything in the last 3-4 months of sat here and just observing from a distance, is that you've got to go at it with a bang, and you've got to appear bigger than what you are straight away and be seen to be doing stuff. So I remember we sat there before we officially launched, whenever it was on the 7th of March. I got the marketing Derby invoice sat on my email ready to go. I said, right, we're doing it, and we're literally going to go to all the events. We're going to turn up, we'll be seen, we'll know who we are. We then did all the work with Amanda for the 30 and 30 last year. So we were literally at every event with all the people turning up, doing what we needed to do. And we did all that for nothing. Of course we did, but actually it was on the basis that we'd just be able to put the name out there quickly, and it worked.